Ladies and gentlemen, you have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Friday, March 7th, 2025. I'm David Menzies and my co-host. Well, let me tell you a bit about my co-host, shall I? Do you know what, folks? Today is National Employee Day. Now, she's not my employee, she's my co-worker. And don't tell anyone, folks, of all my co-workers, I think I love her the most. Then again, I love all my co-workers here at Rebel News, except one. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is the sensational Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
David, I'm great. I was poking around on the What Day Is Today website, and it's National Friday Fish Fry Day. They do their best to obscure that this is like something that most Catholics do during Lent. I grew up in a household, like they just skip right over the fact that this is like a religious thing. It's like, oh, we're just having fish fries today. Why? Why don't you tell people why we're doing it? I grew up in a household that didn't eat meat at all on every Friday or on Wednesdays. My mom was a very traditionalist Catholic in that regard, but I love to see them just sort of say that it's that day, but never actually quite tell you why. That it's Lent.
You know what's interesting though, Sheila? If memory serves, the origin of the Filet-O-Fish sandwich at McDonald's, it came out of a Cleveland franchisee who was in a very heavily Catholic area.
Yep.
and the burger sales were going down on Friday. So he introduced filet o fish, and it went around the
Yep.
world. So I guess, do we have the Catholics to thank for that?
You definitely do. Also, the uh is it, shoot, I forget but there's like the chicken places come up with their really good fish sandwiches this time of year.
Oh,
By the way, you can also thank the Catholics for roll up the rim to win. It
what?
was yes, and it's because a lot of us, not me, I do something a little bit harder than just giving up caffeine. But a lot of Catholics give up caffeine, like as a vice during Lent. And your favorite coffee place saw that as a bite into their bottom line. So they
Wow.
sabotaged our Lenten sacrifices by having their little roll up the rim to win, which comes out at this time of the year.
Unbelievable. See what we learned. And by the way, Sheila, I got to tell you this, since we're on a fast food beat, I didn't even have time to eat my Mr. Submarine tuna sub today. And I'll tell you why. I
Oh,
went
you're
to the
having tuna. Good for you.
Oh yeah, it's because Subway. There's this allegation that the tuna is not really tuna. I think that's part of a lawsuit. So we'll see what happens there. But this is a story for us moving forward. I'll ask the franchisee if he wants to come on camera. The reason why I didn't get to eat it is that there was a lineup outside the store today. So what's the occasion? And I spoke to the franchisee, Dimitri, and he said, if you notice a lot of new faces, I said, yeah, I've never seen these folks before. And believe it or not, it's all part of the tariff tussles ongoing. People have told him that they're trying to support Canadian companies, in this case, submarine companies. So he's got Subway customers, Firehouse Sub customers. They're both U.S. based, and look at the effect on that. I think that's an amazing story. So, but not so much today because I never had time to eat my sandwich.
Do you know, we watched that ridiculous new reiteration of the Molson marketing campaign,
Oh
I
yeah,
am Canadian. And they mentioned in there Tim Hortons, again, Canada's favorite coffee company, which is owned by Brazilian mega corporation. Like the best they could define us it was double doubles and yoga pants. And I'm like, it could have been written by Justin Trudeau. It was so stupid. But anyway, it was
but
just give me
Sheila,
something for the cringe and let me die.
there really isn't many Canadian global brands. I mean, Lululemon is definitely one in terms of the yoga pants, but it's kind of funny. You're right. It began as a Canadian company, Tim Horton and the ex-policeman Ron Joyce, and then it became part of a conglomerate. Was paired with Wendy's for a time. You're right. It's a Brazilian company that incredibly has its head office in Toronto, and it oversees other brands. I think Popeyes, a few more.
Yeah.
It's a huge conglomerate. And the reason why they're there is for tax reasons. So, holy Mark Carney. It's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
just.
Holy Brookfield, Batman. We should tell everybody we're doing
Yes.
here. That's who it was. Popeyes. They do a really great fish during Lent.
Ah.
If you like a spicy fish sandwich, I just have to pick all the bread. I have to decompose it, I was going to say, but like deconstruct it is the word I'm looking for, because I pick the bun off and I pick the batter off. But anyways, they do a good fish sandwich. Anyways, I should tell everybody what we're doing here. It's just not Sheila's tips to survive Lent. We've got a lot to talk about. And my last message in the Slack channel to the team working on the show today was, let's try to stay on topic today.
That I think that ship sailed about 10
Oh, yeah,
minutes ago.
no, as I frequently say, I believe the problem with that, well, the phone call's coming from inside the house, as it generally is. So this
Holy
is
Black Christmas.
exactly. This is the Rebel Roundup. It's our daily news and opinion show where we talk about the news or, anything else really, completely unscripted, where you get our hot takes and our honest opinions about what we think. But here's the thing. We want to know what you think too. So We are streaming on Rumble and we are streaming on YouTube. If you are watching us on Rumble, thank you for supporting a really great free speech platform that lets you speak your mind and lets us speak our mind too. So if you want the full unvarnished version of Rebel News, you're always going to get it on Rumble. You can support the work that we do through a Rumble rant. That's their paid chat. If it's over the $5 US cutoff, we're obligating ourselves to read it on air. Anything under that $5 US cutoff, we'll do our best to get to it, but we cannot guarantee time permitting. But we do want to thank you because we'll never take a penny from Justin Trudeau to hold the government to account. How could we, right? If you are watching us on YouTube, we are, I'm excited to tell you, remonetized over there. Lord knows how long that's going to last, especially with David Menzies on a live stream where there's no time delay. So if you want to support the work that we do there, you can leave us a super chat. Also, after the fact, if you want to leave us a paid comment, you can do a super thanks. And again, the same rules apply over the $5 US cutoff. We'll do our best to read it. No, we're obligating ourselves to read it on air. So I think that's it. We have Alexa Lavoie putting a question to Mark Carney.
Yep.
Or sorry, no, putting a question to Pierre Poilievre about Mark Carney.
Yeah.
Let's watch.
Monsieur Poilievre, Alexandra pour Rebel News. Si c'est possible de répondre à la question en français et en anglais. I was wondering, should the police investigate the fact that Mark Carney was given a confidential briefing by Melanie Joly about the looming U.S. tariff? And why, in your opinion, why Mark Carney is avoiding to speak with media?
I think we should look into these things. We should also find out. Mr. Carney has become very well known for using his political power to become more and more wealthy. He, within days of becoming an advisor to Justin Trudeau, actually after he became an advisor to Justin Trudeau, suddenly Brookfield, his company, was in the running to help in a multi-million-dollar government pension incentive. He used his political influence to try and get governments to subsidize heat pumps from which he could profit. And he's been advising Justin Trudeau for 5 years on the economy, all while he's been moving money and jobs out of our country. Why is it that no one is looking into the conflicts of interest he has already had? Is he really helping the interests of Canada when he talks to the Trudeau ministers about trade with the U.S. at the same time as he moves his headquarters to New York City? I think we need investigations into all of this. And the reason he doesn't want to answer questions from the media is because he gets caught in lies. Remember, he did a post-debate interview, and he said to all of you that he had left Brookfield when the board had made the formal decision to move the Brookfield's headquarters to New York. Well, not only was that false, the board made the formal decision when he was the chair of the board in the room holding the gavel, something he obviously would not have forgotten. It only happened a few months ago. So every time Mark Carney stands in front of the media, he gets caught in a lie, a fib, and a cover-up. He's very sneaky, and he's sneaking around the country, dodging all of your questions. You have to ask your question. You have to ask yourself the question, what is Mark Carney hiding?
Well, Sheila, a great question from Alexa, a great answer, I think, from Mr. Poilievre. And what do we learn from it? Well, Mr. Carney is all about lying. He's all about hypocrisy. He's all about double standards. What do I mean by that? Well, in addition to Brookfield management moving, and that company is responsible for more than $1 trillion in U.S. assets. Suddenly, while Mr. Carney is running against the man not on the ballot, Donald Trump, and wearing Team Canada hockey sweaters and saying, I'm Captain Canuck and I'm going to rescue you. Well, when it was one of his multi-billion, now trillion-dollar organization, it made sense to move to the U.S. for tax reasons. So I'm okay, Jack. You deal with the consequences. Another thing, Sheila, I want to speak about. Just today, Lady Menzoid was having a conniption, and for a change, it had nothing to do with me annoying her. 179 guns banned
Yeah,
by
we'll get to
this
that.
prorogued liberal government. Sheila, I didn't even know there were 179 guns left to ban. I
Yeah.
thought just about every one of them had what's left, bolt action, rifles.
We'll get
But
to that. We'll
but
get to that because there's some funny stuff in that announcement because you've got people who've never touched a gun, looked at a gun, people who have no concept of what a gun is,
Yep.
banning these things.
Yep.
And when you ask them the slightest question, they can't get the facts right. And it's like asking somebody who's never even seen a car to make the rules of the road.
Oh, 100%, Sheila. But where I'm going with this one in terms of the hypocrisy and double standards, I am absolutely certain Mark Carney is all in on a gun ban. And yet, as we reported, we broke the news actually, he has armed RCMP officers, handguns. Forget about restricted weapons. This is prohibited weapons. No Canadian has this right. And by the way, Canadians typically do not have the right for armed RCMP security. That's reserved for the Prime Minister, Supreme Court justices, heads of state, etc. But the loophole, as we found out, folks, and I want to give a tip of the hat to Sheila Gunn Reid, because it was very much hidden on the RCMP's own website. If the public safety minister deems Joe Citizen worthy of armed RCMP security, you get it. So remember, Sheila, the old American Express slogan, membership has its privileges. So this outsider, suddenly he's an insider. One final thing, as much as he's railing against tariffs, what about internal tariffs by the Canadian government on Canadians? Interprovincial trade barriers, the carbon tax, which is slated to go up on April Fool's Day, less than a month away. What about canceling oil pipeline projects, turning down
that's
$1 trillion
100%
worth
tariff.
Pardon me?
A 100% tariff on oil and gas development is what we have.
Yeah, but he's all for oil and gas development in other countries. Again,
Brazil.
Exactly, the hypocrisy and the double standard, right? And when he talks, well, we have to find new markets. We can't exclusively deal with the U.S., something that's been said for decades now.
We know. Thanks, we know.
Yeah, so why is it blackface turned down Germany, Japan, and Greece when they came begging for our liquefied natural gas? No business case, says the man who thinks the budget can balance itself. Anyways, this guy is a bold-faced liar. He's a hypocrite. And if he didn't have double standards, Sheila, he would have no standards at all.
Yeah, there was no business case for Canadian liquefied natural gas, but Trump struck a deal with Japan after Japan came hat in hand to us at least twice.
Yeah.
It's funny that Carney moved his head office of Brookfield out of Canada for tax purposes. Boy, I sure hope he can find the guy who is advising Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on economic issues, including tax policy. I hope he can find him by looking in the mirror. This is the problem with these people. And this is the problem with you and I were discussing the other day off camera, Murray Edwards of CNRL. These guys are so rich that their bad ideas, they can just escape them, right? Like big money is mobile. It can just go. Brookfield can advocate for bad ideas in Canada and then just go somewhere else. Murray Edwards advocating for a carbon tax, supporting the NDP who cranked up personal and corporate tax, and then he takes off to fairer waters while leaving Canadians who can't afford this stuff footing the bill. Like it's just, you get so rich that your bad ideas don't hurt you. And that's the story of the likes of Mark Carney and the World Economic Forum and the darlings at the United Nations.
No, you're 100% right, Sheila. And in terms of good old Murray taking off for Switzerland for greener pastures in terms of taxes, this is why I really believe in karma. I really, really do. Because when he took off to Switzerland, Murray's wife took off with Katie Lang.
That happened before. That happened. Yeah, it happened before. But I became sort of entrenched in like Murray Edwards and like his life. Because I was like, why is he doing this to us? And then I thought, I just poked around in his life a little bit.
And one other thing that's more relevant than what I just said, he's the co-owner of the Calgary Flames.
Yeah.
Getting a new barn to play in. Yeah, and the Calgarian and Albertan taxpayers are going to foot that bill, and he's a multi-billionaire. You know, how do these people that are so well talk about the 1% of the 1% on the entire planet, and we have to buy the playpen, you know, the billionaires' playpens for their multimillionaire athletes? I am sick of this. This has to end. And you know what, Sheila? If the team says you either do this is what happens to the US, or we move, you know what I say? Move. If you look at the economic impact, you're looking at, well, there's a lot of good paying jobs when you're putting up the structure. But for the rest of the future, it's basically minimum wage jobs on game nights. The economic impact, the return on investment for the taxpayer is not there. Whether it's pro sports, the Olympics, the World Cup, you get a financial hangover. Now, maybe Poilievre should take a stance against that. You know, no more handouts for the wealthy.
I'm listening. Let's. I'm trying to keep us on track. We talked about one thing. We're 20 minutes in. Pierre Poilievre's got a message for Trump amidst the tariff chaos. So let's watch this.
Before getting into my announcement about bringing home accountability, allow me to address the unjustified tariffs that the president has now partially backed down from. My message to the president is this: knock it off. Stop the chaos. You are hurting your workers, your consumers, and most immediately, destroying trillions of dollars of wealth on your own stock market. You're attacking a cherished friend of the United States, and you are strengthening America's enemies by going after America's friends. Stop tariffing our country and stop the monthly melodrama that is hurting our economies on both sides of the border. If you want American workers to have bigger paychecks and lower prices, then let's do more trade, not less. But if you choose otherwise, we will retaliate, we will fight back, and we will defend ourselves, because we will always put Canada first.
Sheila, if I may, two things on this. I think that change for Donald Trump's tariff policies will come from within. What do I mean by that? Well, just the other day, the big three, Chrysler, Stellantis now, General Motors, and Ford, met with him about the auto industry tariffs, because the auto industry is so integrated between Canada and the US. This would be devastating for them. And what happened? A 1-month reprieve as they retool this. Why is that? Where are these companies based in, Sheila? Michigan, an important swing state. And if Michigan consumers and workers are going to be adversely affected, this is not good for the Republicans. And likewise, farm states, a lot of them Republican states, if they have to pay huge tariffs on Saskatchewan potash and other fertilizers, they're going to be screaming, you will make our cash crops unviable. So I think that is the ultimate solution, not pressure from any Canadian politician, from Mark Carney or Doug Ford, but from within. And that's why I think we're going to get a resolution on this. And in defense of Donald Trump, what people should know, and this is just a tip of the iceberg, Sheila, when it comes to unjust tariffs, let's take a look at what Canada tariffs charge on the affect the U.S. Milk, 270%.
Okay, we can actually, we've got a clip on that one too.
Okay.
If you want to go to that. And you know what, I'm happy to address some of the milk cartels arguments for this stuff, because it's absolute baloney. I wish they would just be honest. I wish they would just say, look, we are inflating the market price and cheering for tariffs because it makes us richer. At least I would appreciate the honesty, but it's the unscientific nonsense that drives me crazy on this issue. Do we want to show the milk tariff from Trump? It's Juno News clip or ours too. Trump accusing Canada of unfair trade practices, claiming Canada imposes a 250% tariff on U.S. dairy products, makes it impossible to sell U.S. lumber. Okay, let's watch.
They have a tremendously high tariff. Give you the exact numbers in a little while coming out on lumber. So they sell us lumber. They have a tremendous tariff. They make it impossible for us to sell lumber or dairy products into Canada. But our numbers are a tiny fraction of that, almost non-existent. And what we're doing is freeing up our forests from the environmental nonsense that they put on them, where you can't cut down a tree. And we have to cut down trees in order to build the firewalls. And those trees are sold, but we're freeing it up on an emergency basis because Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%. Nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers. So that's not going to happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it. And that's what reciprocal means. And we may do it as early as today, or we'll wait till Monday or Tuesday. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to charge the same thing. It's not fair. Never has been fair. And they've treated our farmers badly. Look, our country's been ripped off by everybody. And that stops now.
And Sheila, as much as I'm a proud Canadian, and I know you
Yeah.
are too, these are the harsh realities of tariffs with Canada and the US. Let me just read a few more. As I mentioned, milk, 270%, cheese, 245%, butter, 298%, chicken, 237%, sausages, for goodness sake, 69.8%, barley seed, 57.8%, and then it goes down into double-digit figures for HVAC, vacuums, cable boxes, aluminum, cars, just to name a few. So, what's good for the gander, right? So these are legitimate beefs. And Sheila, when you speak about, can we have an honest discussion about supply management? Well, what's going to happen first, that or hell freezing over? Let's not forget, going back to 2017, 18, I think, the Conservative Party convention where Andrew Scheer on the 13th ballot with less than 1% of the votes beat out Maxime Bernier. And how did he do that? The last minute push of Quebec dairy farmers. And you had Andrew Scheer doing a photo op where he's guzzling like a half liter of milk in celebration. That's not an honest discussion. That's giving us the middle finger that he's all in protecting this Soviet Union style cartel of dairy, chicken, turkey, and eggs. It is a closed market, and Donald Trump is absolutely well within his rights to complain about it.
And, here's my problem with all of this is like I said, it's the dishonesty. If you were just honest, milk cartel, and say like, look, the quota protects our bottom line, makes us wealthier. Sure, you extract that from the consumer, especially the poorest people who can least afford it, but at least let's be honest. But it's the unscientific health claims that you people are making that drive me up the wall. We don't want our market to be flooded with unsafe American dairy. Tell me, is there an outbreak of people getting sick from American dairy somewhere, anywhere? Please tell me. Their dairy is highly regulated too. Yeah. We don't want people getting sick from potentially contaminated dairy supply with hormones, and you'll never find a hormone in Canadian dairy. Okay, people. Why don't we just then have product of origin labeling on the milk that comes in, and let the consumer decide if they want to be a milk patriot or if they want to buy the cheapest thing. Because right now, the cartel hurts the poorest amongst us. And I've got a real tough time listening to people prattle on about health this, health that, while not giving people the choice to consume raw milk if they so choose, and not complaining about seed oils in the food, or high fructose corn syrup, combined with dairy in the form of the shelf-stable chocolate milk that is peddled to young people. So Give people the choice. I'm somebody, as everybody I think is who is a regular viewer, and David, I care about what I eat and even when I eat it.
Yeah.
But that's my choice, not the government's choice. That's the part that I really hate. I hate the misinformation from the health industry. I hate the misinformation from the cartels, and I hate the lack of choice.
And
That's
Sheila,
my problem.
if I may, and I think you already know this, but for those viewers that don't, back in 1993, I took 6-7 months out of my life to research supply management. This is before the internet, folks. So that meant I had to go down to the Toronto Central Reference Library and go through microfiche. Sheila, the kids today have no idea how
I
good
know.
they have it.
To Google.
Try
Just
researching.
to Google.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No such thing. That's why it took so many months. And this cartel system goes back. The genesis is the late 60s, early 70s. Guess who was the prime minister at the time?
Exactly.
Yep, Blackface's father. And I can tell you, folks, in the initial phases of supply management, this has gotten better, thank goodness. But you actually had in the early 70s Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises closing early because they ran out of their chicken quota. And speaking of quota, who owns this quota, Sheila? You think it's just farmers? No, there's a lot of guys on Bay Street that own the quota. This is a scam. It is, like I said, it's plucked out of Soviet Union controlled market economic theory, and it was started by Blackface's papa, and it should be rescinded. And it's not about just opening up and being more fair to the American farmers and Donald Trump. It's about Canadians.
Small farmers can't get in on this. They can't.
Oh, yeah.
They can't. They're
Sheila,
pushed
at the
right out.
time, it didn't make the final cut. I came across a fellow, him and his wife. Their idea was, we are going to raise really high-end, free-range, completely 100% organic chickens. And every single ounce of that chicken meat is destined for export, typically the United States. So we need some chicken quota. What was the answer? No. Go pound sand, even though it would not affect domestic supply at all. That is killing innovation. That is killing our GDP. And so when I see, a conservative would-be prime minister guzzling down milk, showing that he's all in on supply management. And I know Andrew Scheer's gone on to do great things since he gave up on being leader. I'm sorry, I don't ever see this honest discussion with those, sacred cow, literally commodities being protected, Sheila.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I mean, just go look in the grocery store and you see like the boringness of the yogurt section. It's like 5 companies, that's it.
Yep.
It's all the same kind of yogurt, just in different packaging. That's just one thing. It's the cheese is the same thing. You could have really interesting boutique style cheeses, butters. We don't have that in Canada. If you travel in the rest of the world, you'll see like amazing things. You come to Canada and you're like, oh, okay, so just 5 companies run the place. Apparently, that's our food supply. And
Sheila,
it's not about protecting the food supply. It's about protecting everybody's bottom line.
100%. It's funny you mentioned cheese. The late, great Saturday Night Magazine, when it was owned by Conrad Black, they had a feature once, and this was absolutely fascinating. It was about, and the reporter spoke, it didn't name the farmers, of course, because that would be a death sentence to their livelihood. And it took place in the province of Quebec, where you go to a farm and you want to buy cheese. And then what you do, you look around and you say to the farmer, "Psst, do you have any good stuff? The stuff under the counter?" And that supply exists, but it's hush hush, secret transactions, cash only, as if it's prohibition and you're selling alcohol. And it's cheese. And this stifles innovation, and it contributes to the blandness in that category in Canada, Sheila.
Yeah, what do they call us at the Costco in Bellingham, Washington? The Red Plague.
Yeah.
That's what they call us when we come down there to buy all the milk and the cheese, and then we go back because it's way cheaper there, just a couple of miles across the border.
And
anyway,
Sheila,
we should
just think of what you just said there. Way cheaper, with the Canadian dollar discounted at 35%, and it's still way cheaper. What does that tell you about how we're getting ripped off here?
Yeah, exactly. So Trump's not wrong. But just before we move ahead, because we have to hit an ad break, and then we're over a half an hour into the show, and we've talked about now just 2 things. And then we've got to talk about this gun ban. And I want to show Trudeau crying because it's so pathetic. I just want to just shrivel up and die from the cringe.
No, don't do that.
But I forget what I was going to say. Oh, my messaging to Poilievre has to be, yes, I'm a proud Canadian. Yes, I will stand up for Canadian workers, but I'm the guy to do it because Trudeau has so degraded and fractured the relationship with the United States. There's no way a Liberal can fix this. That should be his messaging instead of just, it's okay to be standing up for Canadian workers. That's what I want from a prime minister. That's actually what we never had from Justin Trudeau. He was so happy to see Canadian oil field workers just shown the door. So yes, Poilievre is running to lead Canada. And so I want to hear a Canadian first response against the tariffs. But I also want him to say, Trudeau led us down this path. The reason Trump doesn't like us is the Liberals. They are not the guys to fix it. That should be the yes and to his messaging. Anyway.
Sheila Gunn-Reid, you should be a political advisor. That is sage advice indeed.
I know that they watch us, so hopefully that's some free advice. Some political consultant would charge big money for that, but I'm just giving it away for free because I want what's best for the Canadian worker. We've got a message here from Truth Social. If you're looking for a great place online for news, discussion, and entertainment, then check out Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media site. You'll get breaking news and commentary from top media figures. If you want to see Trump's legendary Truth Social posts, then get on Truth Social today. Join a growing community of patriots on a free speech platform designed to avoid censorship and cancellation by big tech. Make your voice heard. Join the movement. Join Truth Social. Oh, and by the way, you'll get to hear what Trump has to say first, not filtered through the TDS derangement, Trump derangement syndrome of the mainstream media. All right, let's do a quick Rebel ad break, and then we will go into Trudeau crying and the other news of the day.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
I've got a better idea than tariffs. What would an America First strategy for Canada-U.S. trade look like? Is there room for a Trump-style mega deal even bigger than Greenland? A dozen years ago, I wrote a best-selling book called Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands, which made the liberal argument that the oil sands are the fair trade coffee of the world's oil industry. In my new book, Deal of the Century, I look at Canada-U.S. trade through an America First lens, and I come to the conclusion that far from putting tariffs on Canadian oil, Donald Trump should ink a 50-year, $13 trillion deal to buy all 170 billion barrels of Canada's oil sands, shutting out China and giving Canada the means to pay for a rebuilt military. And as for yanking Trudeau's chain, well, he'll be gone as prime minister in a few weeks, but I've got a better suggestion for how Trump can slap Trudeau around a bit without hurting America's economic interests. That's in the book too. Get your copy now at dealofthecenturybook.com. And trust me, Trudeau doesn't want you to see this.
Sheila, how does our big boss man pound out these fantastic books and so quickly at that? Do you know, I'm 2 years into a novel I started. I'm still on chapter 1. So
you started a novel?
Yes. And it's fiction, So I don't know how Ezra does it. Fact-based books on major issues, and I can't even get a fantasy novel churned out. in less than a decade, I suppose. I know I'm a loser, but this is what happens, folks. I think when you give an assignment to a journalist without a deadline, it'll
That's
never
the
get
problem.
done.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I am pretty self-regulating when it comes to like what I need to get done in a day. I make a list and I love just drawing a line through the things on my list. But when there's something that I can bump ahead to the next day, then I bump it ahead to the next day.
Yep.
And then I bump it ahead to the next day. And then it's like, oh, I was supposed to finish that thing a year ago. So anyways, I relate.
But you know what? And I think, Sheila, all journalists are inherently lazy. They'd rather bump
How
it
dare
off,
you?
bump it off. I'm telling you, I know when I speak to them. And another thing, folks, you have no idea how debilitating the condition is that's called writer's block. And if you don't believe me, just rent the DVD, The Shining, and see what happened to Jack Nicholson. I think the most terrifying scene in that movie, Sheila, is when his wife looks at his manuscript and it is pages and pages and pages of the same copy, which is all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. And man, that just put the little hairs on the back of my neck right upright. So anyways.
I'm scared for Lady Menzies, but I know she's a firearms owner, at least for now.
What are you doing?
Anyway, let's just watch from yesterday, Teary-eyed Trudeau, and then we'll get into the gun ban because as is always the case, in case of emergency in the polls, break glass, and behind the glass, it's a gun ban. But first, let's watch Trudeau just shriveling the ovaries of every childbearing woman in the country with his absolute beta male tears. I can't stand this. This does absolutely nothing for me. It's so emasculine. It's disgusting.
On a personal level, I've made sure that every single day in this office, I put Canadians first, that I have people's backs. And that's why I'm here to tell you all that we got you. Even in the very last days of this government, we will not let Canadians down today and long into the future. Because in the past few weeks, we've been working with our provincial and territorial partners to make sure that families can rely on this system, not just for years to come, but will allow this system to lock in, to become something that no government, a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, could ever go back on. On a personal...
No, David, hang on. What you just saw there was me going through menopause on live TV because all of the female hormones just left my body and were like then ingested by Trudeau and his just disgusting femininity. I just cannot stand his groveling and sniveling. It's so emasculine. It just is a horrible. I can't. It's awful.
You know what, Sheila? I want to get a feminine perspective on this. And any of our viewers that want to do a super chat, if you're female, weigh in on this. I know there's a cliche. I really like a sensitive man, a man in touch with his inner female. But every female I know, coworkers, colleagues, family members, they find it disturbing when they see a man crying. They want a strong, stoic fighter. You know, and I can tell Sheila, I'll give you an anecdote. The last time I cried in a movie cinema, 1993, the movie Thelma and Louise, at the very end, where Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis drive off the precipice of the Grand Canyon, committing suicide. And as the credits began to roll, globs of tears were coming down my cheek, Sheila, because, hey, after all, a 1964 T-Bird convertible, why'd they have to take the car with them?
I am a firm subscriber to the great philosopher Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation, who said, crying is only acceptable at funerals and the Grand Canyon if you're a man. And I believe that wholeheartedly. This was horrific. cannot say it enough that that is so unappealing. The blubbering, I can't take it. I just can't. It's horrible.
But Sheila, let's be real here. And I know this from crime reporters that I've talked to over my career. And it's a serial killer or a mass murderer, and the judgment comes down and they're being sentenced to life or south of the border, in some cases, execution. And you see these heinous, horrible killers crying, and you think, oh, it's their come to Jesus moment. They realize what they did was wrong. No, they're crying because they got caught and they got tried and now they got convicted. It is all about their own psychopathical needs and wants. And I see that in Trudeau. This is his last weekend after the Liberal Party of Canada convention. And then he's out the door, someone who I assume wanted to be Prime Minister for life. And I do not jest. And he realizes the sun is now setting. Darkness is taking lease on his political career. That's why he's crying. He hasn't helped Canadians one iota. He's done the exact opposite in almost a decade.
I think he's crying because the $5 million in renovations to Rideau Cottage are not going to be something that he's going to get to use going forward. Can you believe that? $5 million in
Sheila,
renovations to Rideau Cottage?
At that price point, and I'm not,
tear it down, start again.
Exactly. and people go, oh, it's so historic. Are you kidding?
Reuse the bricks then. Reuse the bricks. I don't care.
It's always funny when I have a Brit friend coming over to Canada. I go, look at this. This structure dates back 120 years. And they go, like, oi, you call this historic?
I know.
I mean, that's like a brand new build in London.
It's worse out here in Alberta, where most of our structures date to an oil boom in the 40s, right? So it's either old farmsteads or oil boom housings from the 40s.
What? Sheila, on the issue of spending, I want to get your opinion on that. And of course, our listeners, if they can weigh in. I get it. Under our system, he's allowed to prorogue Parliament. Why does it seem like business as usual in terms of the checkbook? I'm talking about the daycare bump up. I'm talking about that multi-billion-dollar boondoggle in the waiting, the Toronto to Quebec City high-speed train. I'm talking about... What else am I talking about? There was some other huge expenditure. I'm losing track, quite frankly. But it's almost as though there is an actual prime minister and a parliament in Ottawa right now, because the way at which, of course, more billions to Ukraine. How can this be? This part of our political system has to be renovated, not Rideau College, but the idea that in a prorogue parliament, you can, continue on as, the Santa Claus farewell tour, for goodness sakes.
Because he's buying votes for the next guy. That's what he's doing. I mean, also the $1 billion for the border, because they're prorogued, that is not being spent. And it's one of those rare times where I'm like, yes, would you mind spending the money? The Americans need to see us spending it if you wouldn't mind. But that money cannot be spent because Parliament is prorogued. We just got a super chat for $50.
Wow.
From Donald Anderson, but Donald Anderson, I don't see a chat attached to that. So I'm going to ask our team to keep an eye out to see if maybe you didn't get a chance to attach your chat. And if you have a question or a comment, that we'll do our best to read it on air. But speaking of spending money.
Wait a second. He has a heart. Does that mean he loves us? Because I am the lovable one, Sheila, as you know.
Well, I don't think you give people $50 without liking them. That's for sure. Now, we should talk about, again, there's a gun ban just announced this morning. And this will, again, cost billions of dollars because these are guns that are moving from unrestricted now to prohibited, which means the feds don't even know how many of them there are. But they can definitely put a pin on how much it's going to cost. Sure thing, guys. Sure thing. Let's show a clip from this.
In 2022-23, our government passed legislation to freeze the market for handguns in Canada. banning the sale, transfer, and importation of handguns into the country. Just recently, in December 2024, we went further, banning some of the additional assault-style weapons that remained in the Canadian market. Today, our government is finishing the job, adding a further 179 unique makes and models of assault-style weapons to the list of prohibited firearms here in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. It is our hope, our government's intention, that this be the last discrete listing of assault-style firearms for prohibition. If we finish the job well, we have all the tools necessary to ensure that new models of assault-style weapons will be captured and denied legal entry into the Canadian market. Let's be clear, these are weapons of war, firearms designed specifically to kill as many people as possible in the least amount of time possible. As with previous prohibitions, the weapons we are banning today are semi-automatic firearms with sustained rapid-fire capability. Experts have told us that they exceed safe civilian use.
Sheila, I'm going to say two things, and then I want you to
What
weigh in because
experts,
you've
by the way?
forgotten.
What experts?
Yeah, you've
Anyway.
forgotten more about firearms than I'm ever going to learn. But here's where two things. One is a question to you, Sheila, which is simply, please, for the love of God, can you define what an assault-style
can't.
weapon is? And I'll tell you what the real assault is, because remember, the Liberals are putting on the Captain Canuck costume and saying we're protecting Canadian businesses and Canadian workers against bad orange man. What about all the gun shops and all the employees in Canada that work in those gun shops that are going to be driven out of business if these bastard Liberals get their way with these guns? They are going to have it so that you can't sell any gun. And if you say, oh, but wait a minute, the farmers need guns to get rid of varmints. No. They don't care about the farmers. This is all ideological BS as far as I can see, Sheila. And again, more hypocrisy when it comes to saving Canadian businesses and Canadian jobs.
On the last business day before Trudeau is gone.
On a
they
Friday.
Do this. On a Friday,
mm-hmm.
Last business day. And I'm going to refer people over to Tracy Wilson's X account. Tracy Wilson is with the CCFR. And she notes that Rachel Bendayan, that's the lady you saw talking there, she is, I think, the Deputy Minister of Public Safety and an anti-gun lunatic. And when Trudeau did a cabinet shuffle and shuffled her into that position, I knew a gun ban was coming. I said it at the time. She used American data in her press conference today, and she says there's a list of 179 guns, and those owners are immediately criminalized, but she won't tell us which ones they are. So they're so dangerous that they need to get them off the street, and that the owners of them are now immediately criminalized, but we don't know which ones they are.
Yeah, because Sheila, it's the duck hunters in Saskatchewan that are the real problem. Not, the gangbangers in Canadian inner cities who have multiple convictions, who can get out on bail, even if the charge is as high as attempted murder. Because, the Liberals subscribe to a hug a thug philosophy. That's the problem. The criminals with completely illegal guns running around that get all these second, third, fourth, fifth chances. Meanwhile, law-abiding, legal, tax-paying Canadians bear the brunt of these ridiculous bans. And Sheila, I'm serious, 179 guns? I mean, are there that many guns left to ban, for goodness sakes? I mean, where does this end?
That's a good point. These are being added on top of the already 3,800 prohibited models, again, by the stroke of a pen. Not a single one of these, by the way, has been confiscated. So over the course of, now we're approaching 5, and they won't be.
Yeah.
These firearms owners are covered by a limited amnesty until October. They none of these guns, 5 years, nearly 5 years, they've been in the hands of Canadian firearms owners. They were so dangerous, the government needed to prohibit them immediately, but then also extend an amnesty and not take any of them away. Because it's not making any effect on crime. We should also note that they have, this is kind of funny because it shows how stupid these people are. The Liberals excluded the SKS from today's bans. Now, they have floated the Soviet 1940s era SKS would be in the bans over and over and over again. Now, I know why they didn't put it in there.
Natives?
Because it's, yes, exactly. Yeah. That's what they're claiming. But there's also another reason. But yes, apparently I could use an SKS to kill somebody so that now I can't have my SKS. That would have been the logic. But if you were Indigenous, your SKS bullet would magically bounce off somebody. Okay, sure thing. But anyways, let's talk about the SKS in a second here. But let's see the Liberals' race-based reason why.
In the past, we've seen some firearm models that were designed for military use be later marketed for hunting and civilian use. The SKS, for example, was a firearm designed by the USSR for use in the Second World War. When the war was over, the surplus, of which there was a considerable volume, was dumped at a low price into the Canadian civilian market and marketed for hunting. Tackling complex issues like this one, where Russian firearms designed for one use are then marketed for hunting in Canada. It requires a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to how we classify firearms in this country. I think the classification review, which I've announced today, will address that in particular. The SKS, of course, is a gun that, as I mentioned, has been used for hunting in Canada, particularly by Indigenous peoples. And in our discussions with Indigenous communities, it was made clear that they are used for sustenance hunting, which is a right that we must respect.
Oh, so Sheila, she proved you right in her own words. This is a race-based gun ban.
Yeah, and I just dropped I just dropped an image of the SKS for non-gun owners to have a look at into the chat there, Olivia. These are like your great-grandpa's firearms. They were developed in the 1940s for World War II. They are cheap. They're most people's first gun show purchase because they're cheap, they're customizable, they're cheap to shoot. And here's the thing why I don't think they banned them, and it's besides the race-based ridiculous reason that the deputy gun grabber in the country just gave. It's because they have no clue how many of these there are in the country. They don't know. So if they include the SKS into this, their estimates for how much this is going to cost will balloon. And then how do you make the case for, our gun grab was going to cost a couple $1 billion to, it might cost $5 or $6 billion. And we're going to go door to door and kick in the door of every gun owner in this country because most people have an SKS in their gun safe. So they can't touch this one. And of all the things, it's actually made for war. Like they say the AR is a weapon of war. No, this one might actually be a weapon of war, just World War II.
Oh, and Sheila, when you say going door to door and kicking those doors in, do you think the RCMP is going to go on to an Indigenous reserve and do that? Absolutely no chance in hell. And that's where the minister's own remarks, that's where a lot of these guns are being used.
Yeah, they're being used by a lot of people. I mean, I would guess there are just as many non-Indigenous people who enjoy their SKS as those who are Indigenous. And I don't think the RCMP would go door to door anyway. That's crazy. Yep. And I believe the RCMP have better things to do. And most of our friends in the RCMP are gun owners themselves and advocates for firearms rights. And provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta have said, No, our cops are busy. We're not directing our cops to do such a thing. So
No, this is a very important point, and I know from Tony Bernardo, the firearms spokesman, that these reach outs by the Liberal government. First, remember they were looking at Canada Post doing
oh yeah,
the
Canada
gun
Post was
grab.
like, heck no, no,
Yeah,
no, no,
hard
no.
no. Then they reached out to retired RCMP officers. It was a disaster because
You know,
the
most
fee.
of which are range officers and
Yeah.
firearms instructors. Like when you
yeah,
retire from the
and-
RCMP, you enjoy shooting still.
And Sheila, the good ones don't want to be put in the position of bad cop. Now,
Right.
but this is, as they say out in your neck of the woods, these gun ban prohibitions, it's all hat, no cattle. And by that, the way I talked Lady Menzoid off the shelf this morning when she got wind of this, I said, Lauren, who do you think, do you think anyone's ever going to come to the door and ask for this? And if they do, here's what you're going to say. You know what, officer? I'd love to comply. Funny thing, last summer I was on Lake Wilcox. Our canoe overturned. All my rifles went down to the bottom of the lake. So if you want to
Careful.
send a scuba diver, that's where they are. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. And then shut the door.
Well, and that's why I say they'd have to go to the door of every firearms owner in the country, because these guns were unregistered. They were just regular old guns. You didn't have to register them. They weren't prohibited. They weren't restricted. So you don't know who has them, but you do know who has a PAL or an RPAL.
Yeah.
So those are the people that you would have to visit to come get these. And I just think the RCMP don't have the manpower. You're right. This is just needless virtue signaling. And it's something that the Conservatives will rip out at their first instance.
But you know what, Sheila? How cool would that be if every gun owner, if there was a door-to-door campaign, which I can't visualize in my wildest dreams, said the exact same thing? Can you imagine the RCMP
I lost
grunt?
him in a boating accident. It's a boating accident. Yeah.
And the poor grunt officer going back to his superior and going, hey, boss, I don't know what it is. All these gun owners went on canoe trips and the canoe tipped over.
No, I don't even think it would be like that. The RCMP officers I know would be like, perfect, thank you. Next. Like, perfect, thanks. Tell your friends. I hope all your gun-owning friends were on the lake that day when the waves came.
And by the way, Sheila, I spoke to a politician who I shall not name. It was off the record. But in terms of having a gun for castle domain purposes, i.e.,
Cannot.
I know you cannot, but there is a loophole, and it's actually being tested in court, and it worked. Forgive me, I can't remember the name of the case. If you don't own guns, folks, the way it works, you've got to store your guns in a lock safe. They cannot have any ammunition in it. So the idea of, like, the American example of having a gun, in your night table, for example, in case somebody does a home invasion of your premises, can't be done. Oh, but there is a way around it, and this is what you do, Sheila. You keep that gun loaded in your bedroom, and when the police are doing the investigation and they're about to lay charges on you because you had a loaded gun in your bedroom, presumably, what you say is, you know what, officer? I always store it downstairs. Ammo, guns, separate safes, trigger locks, everything. But you know what? I have insomnia, you see. So I stay up at night cleaning my gun.
David, don't take David's legal advice.
No,
don't.
This has been demonstrated in a case, Sheila. So I was cleaning my gun at the time, 4 a.m. The bad guys came in. I'm telling you, I'm going to look up that case. And I'm going to prove you wrong, my friend. So there is
the case of Ian Thompson. In August of 2010, 4 masked men shouting death threats began hurling firebombs at Ian Thompson's house.
I remember that.
Yeah, $60,000, and 3 years later, where the process is the punishment, Ian Thompson was acquitted. He was an experienced firearms instructor. He called 911 immediately. He didn't live in town. He armed himself with a .38 caliber revolver, stepped outside his home, and fired 3 shots. 1 into his lawn and 2 into a stand of trees. His attackers fled, were later arrested. All 4 pled guilty to arson and disregard for human life and were sentenced between 2 and 3 years in prison. So then Thompson was charged with 4 crimes. Careless use of a firearm. I don't think he was careless. I think he was precise. Pointing a firearm and 2 charges of careless storage of a firearm, one for each of the pistols he had removed from his gun safe. The second and 9mm pistol was never fired during the incident. Seems like he wasn't careless at all. The first 2 charges were dropped because it was self-defense, but the Crown insisted on careless storage, and he was able to prove that he could get to his gun safe, get his gun, load it in the time that they said he couldn't do it.
And
Anyway.
Sheila, I'm aware of that case. It is despicable. And what a fact we must point out when you say that he shot 1 bullet into the ground and 2 into the trees, it's not that Mr. Thompson was a bad shot. The precise opposite. These were warning shots. Warning shots.
He didn't hit anybody.
Yeah,
He's a
and
firearms instructor. He could have hit them.
And he wasn't intending to hit anyone. He was saying, beat it, I can hurt you. And they still put those 4 charges against him. Absolutely despicable.
Okay. We've got a quick couple of chats, I believe. We've got one from Alberta Dawn. $5. He says, I'm a retired 67-year-old sports shooter. I bought a rifle from Saskatchewan on Monday that arrives in southern Alberta maybe today. Banned? Who knows? Who knows? They won't even tell you. Their guns so dangerous they must be banned, but you don't even know if you own them. These liberal token gun bans are ridiculous. They do it every time something bad is happening to them in the polls. You can trace the gun ban to some Trudeau controversy every single time.
Well, thank you, Alberta Dawn. But the difference here, Sheila, they're doing it with a pro-rogue parliament, which
I know.
I think is egregious.
Well, yeah, but they did it with an order in council in May 2020.
Yeah.
You know, Brenda gives us $30. Thanks, Brenda. I absolutely love you guys. Keep spreading the truth. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brenda.
Now, allow me to read a quick message from a sponsor because we must pay the bills. We won't take any money from Justin Trudeau, so we've got to get it from somewhere. This one is from 1775 Coffee. Weak coffee is for the weak. And at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity, just like 1775 Coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out BS when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans, roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness, and vitality mushroom blend, real energy and lasting focus, no synthetic garbage. For K-Cup pods, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com. Use the code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and $30,000 cash. You know, I saw a Cybertruck the other day, like in my neck of the woods on the highway, like going into town. It was last Sunday and it was turning into church.
But you know what? I love those Cybertrucks. I know a lot of people think the design is too radical, but I would say better too radical than to be yet another boring blob teardrop vehicle that blends in with the. And on the and by the way, you have me with the word Cybertruck, and of course I'm a big contest aficionado. I want to say one thing about the Cybertruck. This happened last week in New York. Sheila, and this shows you how despicable and disgusting the so-called loving, tolerant left are. In Manhattan, a Cybertruck was spotted. The owner was away from it. It was parked, and when he came back, somebody had spray painted a red swastika on the Cybertruck. Why would that be? You don't like Elon Musk, who's giving millions and millions of dollars worth of his time to reduce government spending.
He's
who is
very
huge,
pro-Israel, by the way.
You took the words out of my mouth. And so how is, again, the left is stuck in this primeval mode, Sheila, that if you disagree with me, therefore you are a Nazi and I have the right to harm you or vandalize your property. Absolutely despicable.
The punch Nazi crowd has never actually seen a real Nazi because the supply does not meet the demand.
Well, they're not hanging around Fraulein Freeland. I'm sure she could link them up to a genuine Nazi or two.
Yeah. Okay, David, I think we're done. We're 7 minutes over. We hit everything that was in the headline, unless somebody has something else that they want us to talk about. But we hit the gun ban, Trudeau crying, Trump tariffs, and Poilievre's remarks about Carney. So I think that is.
I thought you were
everything in a
champing
tidy
at the
package.
bit to talk about Jason Kenney, but maybe we can leave that for another
Do you know
day.
what? I've got a lot of things to say about Jason Kenney, and I don't think he's going to stop being terrible. So we can talk about it on Monday. I just don't like his return to social media without any sort of contrition. He is very vocal in the tariff trade war. Apparently, he's a defender of small businesses these days. I wish he had felt that way when he was shuttering them. And just a little bit more on my monologue about Jason Kenney. I believe in redemption. I truly do. How
Me
could
too.
you not? If I'm not of the left throws away people for their mistakes. If you don't meet some sort of ideologically driven purity test retroactively, today's version of you doesn't matter. I don't believe that. But here's the thing. To have redemption, you have to have contrition. And I've seen none of that from Jason Kenney. He was Mr. Religious Freedom until he needed to be brave enough to just simply allow people to go to church, and he couldn't do that. I saw one too many arrested pastors, arrested businessmen, and arrested protesters. I can't stomach it. And Danielle Smith, I think, is the biggest redemption story in Canadian political history. Crossed the floor, destroyed her own party, destroyed her own credibility, and then wandered in the wilderness for the better part of half a decade. She made amends. She apologized, and she became a champion for the people, and we rewarded her for it. We believed that her change of heart was sincere. And whatever you feel about anything she said this week, she did do the truth part of the Truth and Reconciliation. Kenny's done none of that, so I just wish he didn't show his head in public again until he did those things.
And you know what, Sheila, I'll just end it with a quick anecdote. I might have said this before, but to your point, in terms of redemption, and as long as it's genuine, that the public are very forgiving, contrary to popular belief. I go back to the early 80s, the tainted Tylenol scandal. Somebody
wasn't even their fault.
It wasn't their fault, but I believe there were 8 deaths because of, I think it might have been arsenic put into Tylenol tablets. What did Johnson & Johnson do? Contrary to their own legal advice, say nothing. Don't admit liability. No, they issued a public apology. They pulled every tablet of Tylenol on the planet, billions and billions of Tylenol tablets, even though this was confined to one neighborhood in Illinois. That's the tainted Tylenol. They then came out with the forerunner of what is common in supermarkets and drugstores today, tamper-proof packaging. And they did this mea culpa. And as what you just said, Sheila, the public realized, Johnson & Johnson was not responsible for this. It was some maniac, someone who remains uncaught some 40 years later, Sheila. And I'll never forget, CNN, they had a reporter, and this is how he ended his piece as the scandal was going on. He said, while it remains unknown who's doing this, what is for certain is Tylenol as a brand name is dead. And Sheila, let me tell you something. Because Johnson & Johnson did everything in their power, because they were genuinely apologetic, Tylenol's market share of Tylenol today is a greater percentage than it was in the early 80s. So to your point, if you do a mea culpa, if it's genuine, the public will forgive you. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Doug Ford. Okay.
Yeah.
But I agree, Sheila. So maybe Mr. Kenney will take your sage words of advice.
He's one of the people who doesn't take my political advice that I give out for free. He was Mr. Principled on religious freedom until the rubber met the road. He was fine to talk about it in places like China, but not in Alberta. And like Danielle Smith betrayed Wild Rosers. And who were her biggest champions when she decided to run for premier? Wild Rosers, because she had done the wandering in the desert and introspection. He's done none of that. Now he's a champion for small businesses fighting back against the tariffs. Puke.
See, there's hope for all you politicians, with one exception. Sneaky Patrick Brown. Anyway, that ends our broadcast for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to my lovely co-host, Sheila Gunn Reid, and special thank you to those who gave contributions. Greatly appreciate that. Sheila and I will be back on Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, folks. And as always, stay safe and stay sane.
Conflict of interest rules do not apply to leadership candidates. Mr. Carney could win the Liberal leadership and become Prime Minister without revealing to Canadians his massive multi-million-dollar foreign holdings. And he isn't even required at the point of becoming Prime Minister to reveal these holdings. He has 60 days to share the information with the Ethics Commissioner, and then another 60 days for a total of 120 before some of that information goes public. Worse, he can simply put the existing holdings in what is called a blind trust, while his trustee keeps him invested in all of the same things. So he could go on and govern for years, quietly and subtly knowing what investments he has and making decisions that profit himself at the expense of the Canadian people. He could affect vital regulatory decisions, national security, international trade, all to his own benefit, all against the benefit of the Canadian people. Now, if you question whether he's willing to do that, keep in mind that Mark Carney's first decision after Donald Trump first threatened tariffs against Canada was to move his headquarters to the United States, sending Canadian jobs to America. So, what if he continues making decisions, but now has all the power to make them with being Prime Minister of the country?